Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last day of August. Hope all of you are well and staying safe and getting vaccinated. Tonight, we're going to talk about 5354 to 5356 North Sheridan Road, commonly known as the Wing Ho building, for all the egg rolls that our community has devoured over the years. Over the last couple of years, you have been involved, for those who've been involved in this process, and zoning change to put a new building this location. That zoning change went through our community past. What happened, there was a bills, which is why tonight we have before you again a different proposal that we think, if the community supports, and I support, will lead to a building being put there. So recently, we've kind of initiated the community process with this building. There's been an open house, some other meetings, which the group who is developing this property will get into. But the slight change that the size of the building will go from 4 stories to 5 stories, same unit count. The unit size and makeup will be a little bit bigger than what was previously in the old proposal. And there will be 4 additional parking spots. There will be 10% of the units will be affordable on site. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to the Tempest real estate team, which will be the development group that's looking to build this property. And we'll hear their presentation, and then Allie will moderate a Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Tempest team and to go through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Again, this is Nick Fatikas. I'm one of the attorneys at Jim Banks's office, working on behalf of Tempest Real Estate on the proposed Wing Ho redevelopment. Just to give a little bit more background, the proposal is, again, to take the 15,000 square foot site and develop it with a new 5-story, 50-unit residential building. As the Alderman mentioned, this had gone through an aldermanic and city council process already. We changed the zoning back in October of 2019 from B3-3 to B2-3. And that was a type 1 zoning change, which means the plan tied to the underlying zoning. What ended up happening is that design, the 4-story design, required us to obtain rear setback relief as part of our building program. And earlier this summer, the Zoning Board of Appeals denied the application for the rear setback relief. So we worked with Alderman Osterman's office to come up with a solution plan that still fit within the B2-3. And the plan that we'll present again later this evening is just that. As the Alderman said, it's a 5-story building, 50 residential units. We've increased the size of the units, and we're no longer providing studios. We also were able to increase the parking total from 21 to 25 when we redesigned the building. I'll turn the floor over to Bill Hornoff, our project architect, in just a second. But leading up to this meeting, we did host the informational meeting. We also met with representatives from ASCO, as well as representatives from the Metropolitan, our building neighbor immediately to the south. And in following up on those conversations, the program that's being presented does have a rooftop deck above the building's 5th floor. And we've committed to control that by, during the week, limiting the hours of access to the rooftop to 10 o'clock p.m. and then 11 o'clock p.m. on the weekends. We also will be incorporating a bit of a screen wall on the southern exposure of the roof deck, just to better screen the tenants from our building from the tenants of the building to the south. And I wanted to make sure those small changes were incorporated and referenced in tonight's meeting. With that, again, turning the floor over to Bill Hornoff to take you through the building plan, and we can answer questions from there. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Roden-Hornoff. I'm with 2RZ. We're the architect on the project. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen, and I'll take you through the drawings, specifically the changes that have been made since Some of you are probably very familiar with the project, maybe in at least its initial incarnation. It's still a very similar building to what we had before. It just doesn't extend all the way back to the alley, and it has a 5th floor on top. So you're looking at a view of it from looking back southwest. So this is Balmoral on the right, and then Sheridan across the front. On the site plan, you can see Balmoral's across the top. The building is shaped like a amended L. It's set back off the Balmoral side about 6 feet. Along Balmoral, there are residential units that have their own entrance. And then along the alley, we have parking, and then the entrance for loading and parking to the parking on the back side of the south portion of the site. As I said, there are 6 apartments across Balmoral. They each have their own entrance. So they're almost like little individual units themselves. You can see the parking on off the alley, and then there's additional parking that you access from the driveway access from the alley. There are, as Nick had mentioned, 25 parking spaces and 1 loading space. The upper level, the apartments have a mezzanine level in them. That is the 1st floor apartments. And then floors 2, 3, 4, and 5 are identical. There are 11 units per floor, 4 2-bedrooms and 7 1-bedrooms. As a result of changing the plan, that is kind of pulling the building back that 30 feet from the rear yard, the units have all, because they're now spread over 4 floors, have all gotten a little bigger. And as Nick had mentioned as well, there are no studios here. It's just 2s and 1s. The building elevations, the building is clad in cement panel and a metal panel. More elevations. The height now is 62 feet to the ceiling of the 5th floor with a roof deck above that. And the view on the right is a view on Sheridan looking north, and then the view on the right is looking at the Balmoral elevation. Well, that was short and sweet. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll leave them up in the event that there are specific questions regarding the plans too.
And Bill, before we turn the floor over to question and answer, I just wanted to make sure the zoning request was clear. We are currently zoned B2-3, but that B2-3 is tied to the previous plan set. So what we're asking the city council to do is amend our B2-3 so it remains B2-3, but it ties to this revised plan set. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody from a zoning front. And with that, we can answer questions.
Let me also make one other point, which is that I'm going to be accepting feedback from residents in the community via email, letter until next Tuesday night at 5. So people have an opportunity to weigh in. But with that, Allie will moderate the Q&A.
All right, so just to review how Q&A will work, I see some of you have found your way to the chat, which is great. I'll start with questions there. If you would like to speak, Steve, I see you're asking about that. You can use the raise hand function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, or on your phone, you might need to tap your screen to see the options. And we will be able to unmute. I'm gonna start with reading questions entered in the chat first, and then we'll address the raised hands in order that they come up. And this is how we've been doing our community review meetings the last few months. So to start, Bill, I think a few of these are gonna head your way.
Great.
What will the visual characters be of the concrete cladding? Will you be able to mimic this to look like stone? And is the concrete painted? I'm gonna combine 2 questions for you.
Sure, that's great. So the cement panel are panels that are applied to a unistretch system. So it's going to be a unitized panel. So while it's not stone, it will have this sort of pattern of stone in that there'll be a running bond pattern, and the scale of the panels, while we're still working that out, will be somewhere in the 2 to 4 foot range. So it's not going to be solid concrete wall, so to speak.
Right. How is this going to impact the roof decks of the buildings that are to the west of the building on Balmoral?
Well, our original proposal, as many of you know, went back to the rear property line. So in this case, there are no balconies. There are no balconies on our building on the rear, and our building sits back 30 feet off the rear property line. There are balconies, of course, as you can see on the Sheridan side and on the Balmoral side. And then, as you saw on the plan, the building is set back off the southern property line. There are balconies there as well. So the balconies are quite a ways from the rear of the building.
Is it going to loom over the buildings to the west?
The buildings to the west, I believe, are 4 stories. And our building is 5 stories. So our building is 62 feet, as I had mentioned. And again, it's 30 feet away from that rear yard. You saw that in the site plan. I'm happy to share that with you again.
That might be good.
So here's the edge of our building. This is our property line. These are the beautiful telephone poles that line the alley there. So that kind of gives you a reference as to where the building sits in respect to the rear property line. And by the way, the building itself, zoning allows us to do a 65-foot tall building, and ours is at 62. So for what it's worth, our building is of course shorter than that.
All right, I will go ahead and have our first raised hand unmute. It is Steve Weinshell. Steve, you'll be able to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. My understanding from the last meeting was there was going to be, or I heard it on the street, that there was going to be access to the building from Balmoral, but there is no roadway intended for Balmoral other than the alley. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe there's we call that driveway off of Balmoral now to the property. That's going to be removed. So there'll be some parking replaced on the street for that, but all access to the building will be from the alley side.
Okay. So I mentioned before, and I'm not quite certain why there is the change with regard to, or is that because does the building now go all the way from north to south? Yes, that's the issue. Because the access from Sheridan on the current site is like the only driveway on Sheridan that's not problematic. But I can see the building covers that space now, so that's out of the question.
There is no access. There is no access off of Sheridan into our building.
Okay. So the one thing I found interesting, you mentioned that there's going to be screening on these to protect the building to the south. The building to the south, the residents are, it's like 100 yards away. There's not. So I can see screening for other areas, but that's like the last place anyone's going to be, I would think, be concerned about the building.
Well, and again, I just raised that point because it was asked of us by the board at the Metropolitan. I think there was a concern about us looking over. I think there's a pool and some other recreational space to the south, and we don't have an objection to putting up a little bit of a screen wall on our the south side of our roof deck.
All right. Lastly, I just want to comment on parking because it's and you're not alone. The neighborhood is tough, and the building that is on your block across the street and just a bit west, 1016, which also happens to be probably one of the lowest income properties in the neighborhood. There's absolutely no parking. I mean, I've been parking there for 30 some odd years. I'm in a vintage building just west of that. We have no parking. And I do want the Alderman's office to be aware that, Balmoral to Sheridan, there's no parking to be had. And we've even had properties from Sheridan attempt to rent parking spaces on Kenmore. There's an open lot in the 5400 block of Kenmore. And those, for the most part, are filled up. And people, when things open up on Sheridan, they move back to Sheridan. But there is a shortage of parking. When things get very tough economically, things open up on occasion. But for the most part, it's very tough. The other thing related to that is, if I've got a new puppy, so for the last month, I've been getting her out at about 6 in the morning, and at absolutely every intersection on Balmoral and on Kenmore, has an illegal car parked at the intersection, multiple illegal cars parked at the intersections, because there is no parking for people off street or on street. So that's it. That's a comment. I don't know that anything's going to be done about it, but I think going forward, we do have to think about the fact that not everyone's going to be jumping on a train or the 147 bus. The community needs parking.
All right, thank you, Steve. It's a good segue to another question that came in the chat. Can you, Bill or Nick, could you please review what current zoning requires for parking to dwelling unit ratio, what you're asking, what that all means?
So the current zoning, it's actually pretty unique because again, the existing zoning is tied to a plan that we cannot get a permit for because of the rear setback design. So again, what we're trying to do is amend the zoning to allow this specific building design. On its own, though, a property zoned B3-3 within the transit-oriented development range is entitled without any relief request, but they're entitled to a 50% parking reduction. And as Bill mentioned, our original plan was for 21 spaces. We're now providing that 25th space. So we're actually at the parking ratio that the zoning would allow, quote unquote, as of right. Again, it's a little bit convoluted in this case because the current zoning relates to the plan that we can't get a permit for. And we need the zoning change to basically substitute this design for the prior design. But from a parking standpoint, we're actually now compatible or consistent with the transit-oriented development allowance.
All right. What type of an amount of landscaping will be added along Sheridan Road and Balmoral?
Great question. I don't believe we are adding anything new along Sheridan. I believe the existing trees will remain. On Balmoral, it's interesting. There are existing trees that will remain, but we are providing additional trees specifically towards the western part of the boundary where there are no trees now. So we're filling in really the parkway on Balmoral. And then I believe we're going to have some landscape requirements on the site because we have open space.
Great. Will there be a place like a cutout or a pull-up zone for Uber, Amazon, FedEx, etc.?
I'm guessing that question was by Sandy. There is a loading zone in front off of Sheridan that we are providing that is not currently there. Now, the design and the location is going to be approved by CDOT, so that might change. But our intention is that there is loading off of Sheridan in addition to our loading space in the back. Thanks, Sandy, for that.
That was not Sandy's question, actually. That's a good sign that you know Sandy. I'm sure everyone on the call does. Alderman, a neighbor would like for you to address the lack of parking in the community and how you plan to assist with alleviating this rather than supporting fewer parking options.
So I'm going to get $2 billion from President Obama to build the Red Line renovation. Partly in jest, but I think, I think parking is terrible in the neighborhood. I would say that right now, because of the construction of the Red Line, we're kind of in a transition point. Once Berwyn, Bryn Mawr, Argyle are done, I really believe that more and more people are going to rely on it because it's going to add to the speed of which to get downtown, as well as the capacity. So the Blue Water building that has been built is in the process of being built to the north of this building. We'll have some parking in it as well. So I think the parking situation is one that I continue to evaluate. But I understand the issue with it, and we're just going to continue to look at options. But there will be people that if this building is approved, that will move in here in 1-bedrooms, and we'll be taking public transportation. I mean, we live by the lake and we live by great public transportation. I think a lot of people are going to continue to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Is there any screening to the west, or this is the question writer's words, not mine, will they look out their windows at your looming building?
There's no screening on the top of the building where the rooftop deck is. The screening there is effectively the stairwell that provides ingress and egress to the rooftop deck. Bill, if you want to speak to the elevation, west facing elevation, and again, I just remind that that person asking the question that, again, what's significantly different about this design is that the rear of the building is 30 feet from our rear property line, and even further given the dimension of the public alley. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bill, that was a 16-foot alley.
That's correct.
So it's just doing the math, 30 and 16, it puts our building 46 feet away from our nearest residential neighbor to the west.
And to be clear, since I have this up, this is the roof deck here. This is the west stair tower, and then that's the east stair tower. So you can sort of see how and there's a planter along the north side. And then this is where we talked about screening to the south. So, effectively the roof deck is really enclosed on most of its sides.
Right, and I don't see any new questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands up, but we can give it a minute if anything else comes to you. Oh, all right. Steve Weinshall has his hand up. One question, Steve. You can unmute, Steve.
It's a statement rather than a question. With regard to additional L usage, I mean, we have a significant shortage of police, and people are experiencing that, and people are not going to be jumping on the L where there's no protection. There's going to be protection on the L stops, and there's going to be protection on the cars. To that end, as long as we have COVID, you're going to see fewer and fewer people using public transportation, because nobody in public transportation does any management to the riders. So if a rider chooses to get on onto a bus or onto a train without a mask, nothing is done about it. So there will be a drop off, and it's unfortunate, but we don't have management. We don't have police management, and we don't have services managers.
All right, noted. Okay, Sandy Che did request that I read the statement she put into the chat on behalf of ASCO, the Association of Sheridan Condo Owners. Sandy writes, ASCO supports and approves the development at 5356 North Sheridan with its changes. Since there are 2 curb cuts north on Sheridan, which are successful with getting delivery trucks off of the street, ASCO is pleased that you have one in your plan. So that is on behalf of Sandy and her team. A few more questions come in. There's a note from Sasha, concern about the loss of a business on Sheridan. She didn't have a question. Leslie asked.
Let me address the business part of it. I mean, I am, as a lifelong Edgewater resident, I'm a Wing Ho guy, but Wing Ho's is gone. I think what we're going to see moving forward is on Sheridan Road some opportunities for improved commercial development around Foster. There's some vacant storefronts there. So I think with the Breakers building, as well as with the buildings near Foster, I think there's opportunities to get some smaller independent businesses that will cater to the community. So that's something that we will focus on.
There's a question, I'm guessing, about exterior lighting, wondering if it will be dark skies lighting. If you can speak to the lighting, Bill?
Great question. So yes, so our lighting, for that lighting, which is outside, will point down only to participate in the Dark Skies Initiative.
Great. And Alderman, Nick, can you reiterate what feedback or what approval this project is seeking, and what neighbors should be sending into our office in terms of feedback?
I can clarify the zoning ask, and I'll defer to the alderman on the scope of feedback. We're asking for approval of a type 1 zoning change, substituting the 4-story plan for this new proposed 5-story plan that meets the setback requirements on the lot. The zoning of B2-3 will stay the same. The plan is what's changing. And that's from a zoning side, that's the ask of the alderman in the local community.
And I think a version of what Nick said, and or a more simpler, that people support this new plan as it's been proposed and kind of circulated with the community, but also walked through tonight and at the previous opportunities with the development team. So I think if people can email me, write a note, drop it off, hearing your feedback would be important.
Great. And how much lighting, Bill, is on the west alley side of the building? This is from a neighbor that I gather from previous questions lives in the building immediately to the west.
So I don't believe we have any exterior lighting. I take that back. I think we may have some security lighting at the sidewalk along the building. Here, let me bring up that plan. I think a majority of the lighting on the west side is going to come from those beautiful alley lights that run along our alleys. So right here, we haven't planned this out, but I suspect that we typically would do this, is provide security lighting on the backside. So most of that's really going to be the only thing on our property. So, and all of the doorways along Balmoral will have an entry light for them. So it'll be minimal on that side of the building.
Great. And then Nick, can you just clarify the parking ask and the TOD compliance?
Sure. So if the zoning had never been changed and we had a B3-3 zoning district, we would be required, because of our proximity to the Berwyn L station, we would be required to provide a minimum of 50% of the parking requirement. In this case, and so that would be 25 spaces for 50 units. In this case, again, with Bill's redesign, we are now providing that 25 parking space total to support the same 50 unit proposal.
Access to parking, is that just off the alley? The question is, the only access to new buildings parking will be from Balmoral going east, or if they go north up the alley from Foster. I think Berwyn.
That's correct. As Bill said, parking is accessed through the public alley. Yes.
We will be discouraging trying to get parking from Foster, though, because I think that's a significant distance to get from Foster to Balmoral. So I think, we don't want to have the alleys overrun with speed of parking. And I think Mary's got a question regarding affordable housing. The units will be dispersed throughout the building based on the unit mix. So if whatever the percentages of 2s and 1 bedrooms, the affordable units will reflect that mix.
Will there be a gate along the alley between the parking lot, the parking spaces in the alley? And will it be opening and closing a lot, causing noise?
There is no gate along the alley, so you can see the parking is accessed directly off the alley. At least that's a plan as of today.
All right. And Ms. Jeffrey Pfizer, a lot of questions. We can follow up with you offline of this meeting if necessary to clarify your questions, and we can connect you with Nick Fatikas. I'm not seeing any new questions. I'm not seeing any hands up. Is the parking open or covered? It looks open. Is that correct?
It's partly open and partly covered. What we're seeing right here from this point forward, this is all covered parking. And then those are covered parkings as well. So this line represents the building above. And it's all enclosed from Sheridan, so you won't see parking walking down Sheridan.
What is the plan for property management? Will there be on-site management?
Tempest Real Estate actually manages its own buildings. So yes, and that was actually a question that came up in our conversation with the Metropolitan. So Tempest, the developer, will also self-manage the building going forward.
All right. Okay, all these last minute questions coming in. When do you hope to break ground?
So in order for us to break ground, we actually have to work through the city council zoning change process. We would presumably, if we have support to proceed, we should be able to finish that before the end of September. And then we'd actually have to go in front of the Chicago Plan Commission because of this property's proximity to the Lakefront Protection Zone. We're a block obviously away, or not even a half a block away from the lake, and that requires an additional review. Chances are we would break ground sometime in spring of 2022, assuming all of the approvals are in place prior to then.
Why are not all of the parking spaces covered? We get a lot of snow in the winter.
Well, that would require our building to go back to the lot line, and then we would be back where we were before. So I don't know why it's open. You know, sunshine is good too, right? There's no reason.
You guys will also you'll have a contractor who will be in charge of snow removal around the building as well as in the alley entrance. And I think if you can make the commitment to be a good neighbor and not shove the snow one way or the other, but help make sure that that alley access is clear, we would appreciate that.
We can make that.
And one other question, Bill, is I think if possible, having exterior security cameras on the alley side. I think that may have come up previously, but would like to see that happen
Sure.
on behalf of both the tenants, but also the neighbors right there.
Absolutely.
If you could just speak to the management. Someone asked, will there be maintenance staff on site? And what will the procedure be if maintenance is needed?
So we have maintenance staff that handles all of our properties. So they're on call 24/7, but they're not going to physically be on site, just like the property manager is not going to physically be on site because the building isn't large enough for that. But we have a sophisticated, structure that makes sure that everything gets handled like snow removal and maintenance issues for all of our buildings. So there won't be any issues.
Great. Alderman, you ready to take us on home and review how people can share their feedback and what's next?
Yes, so one is just appreciate all the feedback and the questions tonight. And kind of throughout this process, I think if people have an opinion about the process, the building as it's proposed, I'd like you to email my office at harry@48thward.org. We'll be collecting all that feedback between now and next Tuesday night at 5 o'clock. And then we will let the community know kind of the direction we're going to go from here. So feel free to send an email, drop a letter by the office, but let us know what you think of the proposed project and the zoning that's required with it. And with that, if there's, go ahead.
Answer one last question. A question came in about why not exit on Balmoral or Sheridan. So the parking can be accessed from Balmoral, and our office discourages driveways right onto Sheridan and curb cuts for safety of pedestrians. All right.
Great.
That's a wrap.
Everyone have a safe night and a safe Labor Day weekend. And we'll look forward to hearing from you, as well as letting you know how this project will future of the direction of the project.